Hello! This episode is going to be a juicy one. So the title of this, Self-Employment Lessons I Learned from a Drug Dealer. A little bit clickbaity, but it is going to be juicy and it is going to be interesting as well. So I do need to start with a little bit of a backstory on this because you need context. You need context who and what and why I'm learning from. So the backstory is that when I was growing up, my parents were split up, my biological parents that is. So I had my mum who was very hardworking, and she met my dad, the dad that I have now, when I was 5. They got married when I was 7. They had my sister Sophie, and that was our family dynamic. But my biological dad was in and out of my life, and the reason is because when I was a young child, he was a drug dealer, and he committed robberies. He was very violent, not towards me, but towards my mum and other women in his life. And he actually went to prison when I was a kid. I remember visiting him in prison. I remember going there, and obviously came out eventually. So it was very in and out. And then when I was a teenager, or just before, he had a girlfriend and we used to go to his house a lot. In fact, this happened on and off. We used to go, and I saw the 2 different businesses I was running. So one of them was obviously he was a drug dealer. So I didn't know this. I wasn't aware. I was a very innocent kid. I had no idea what was going on. So what I do remember is being 9 years old and seeing this wooden box full of money, absolutely full of money, and I found that really interesting. And then there was always people coming and going at his house. So his girlfriend at the time had a few kids, and they had quite a big family. So because they had these few kids, so the kid's dad came, and then other kids, brothers, sisters, friends used to come. It's quite busy. But then one day, this woman knocked on the door, and I saw him put something in her hand, and she gave him some money. And I went home, back to my mum, and told my mum. Obviously my mum wasn't daft. She knew what he was doing, and obviously she pulled him up on it, and she's like, I'm not having you drug dealing with the kids. And he basically called me a liar. At the time, I remember driving around Holbeck, which is an area in Leeds, in the car, talking about school, and I had my drawing stuff with me, and I was drawing, and we just went out driving for the day. And I remember thinking it was pretty cool that we just got to drive everywhere, and I got to sit in the car and draw. He was actually drug dealing. So that was one business that he ran. And then the other one was a little bit later on, when I was a teenager. I was about 13. He had a different girlfriend. She had a daughter. They had a baby together. And I really got on with her and them. And one of my best friends lived next door. And there were loads of kids on the street. Whereas I didn't have that at home at my mum's house. We didn't have a lot of friends on the street that we could go and play with. So it was nice to go there. And we were going there for what we could get, not for him, really. But at that time, he had a window cleaning business. So when I think of business, I think the self-employed, the entrepreneur in me actually comes from my biological dad. Whether I like that or not, because there's no one else in my family that ever has been a business owner. And obviously, I used to watch him track his sales, his cash flow for the window cleaning, and go collect the payments. And I'm going to share some of the stuff that I've learned from all of that and that experience growing up. But I want to talk about my mum as well, because she, for as long as I can remember, has always worked. I know this for a fact anyway. My mum's been quite open in what she does. So she worked in a fish and chip shop, which was just down the road from our house, from when I was born, from before then, from age of 15 actually, and she had me when she was 20 years old. And she did that for about, I think, 26 years, and then she left and she got another job in a fish and chip shop. Somewhere along the line she worked in a pub and worked in the kitchen in the pub, and then she ended up doing a job that she's in now, where she works for the NHS in a local hospital as a housekeeper. So my mum has always worked. She's always worked long hours, worked her backside off to bring money into the house. When we were growing up, it was to like provide for holidays. Like every year when she met my dad when I was 5, I can't remember when I think I had my first holiday abroad before that, but we then started going on holiday quite regularly, like out of the country. I had a permanent tan. I was the girl in high school that was quite brown because I had this permanent tan. The other girls were jealous of it, which was quite nice to be fair. And I just saw her like working her backside off like non-stop. Literally take us to school on a morning and then I probably wouldn't see her till 8 o'clock at night, which was briefly because she'd sit down, wind down, go for a bath, we'd go to bed. So we did spend a lot of time with grandparents after school until I was old enough for us to stay at home. And we literally watched her work, and I think a lot of my work ethic comes from my mum, but the entrepreneurship comes from my dad. So probably the only decent thing that I've got from my dad, to be honest. But I want to share some of the stories behind this and some of the things that I've realised, the lessons in business that I find quite interesting, that are going to be my advice to you for your business and running your business as well. So I did want to touch on the work ethic first, because I believe the way we grow up conditions our work ethic. So I've worked since I was 16. My first job was working in a fish and chip shop with my mum. My mum was my boss. So it started out as just because basically I was a college dropout, I had nothing to do, was bored out of my mind, and basically my mum's boss was quite lazy, so somehow I ended up giving it a go on a Saturday. I think they were just super busy at one point and they needed an extra pair of hands just to clean up because they were so busy. So I came in one Saturday and I just did a morning, but because I'd done it and I'd done alright, her boss was like, do you want to get Danielle to come back in again? So she was like, yeah, that's fine. And that very quickly turned into my boss getting very, very lazy, very, very fast, and realising that he can pay me for cheap labour. I loved it because I was getting cash for that. And then eventually he put me on the books and I learned more, started serving, and it became more than 1 day a week. Eventually it became like 2 days a week until I was 18 when I got my first, that was my proper job, but I got a job part-time. So it went from 2 days a week to a part-time job at a pub, which was literally a few doorsteps down from the fish and chip shops that I worked at. So those were my first jobs, and I loved the money that I was earning. I loved the freedom of being able to meet, like because I was working in a pub, I made friends with people, and so I really liked going to spend that, and I was drinking with them. I met my husband in that pub, and it was just fun. It was really fun to be able to play with this bit of money that I had, because my mum didn't really want anything from me. So I'd watched her work and play, and then I'd adapted that same work ethic, so I just took on more and more hours. I ended up actually applying to go back to college, but they advised me, I was working 12 hours at the pub at that time, and they advised me not to do it. They said it was too much to be in education and to work, which I disagree. Like, we were a family that didn't get EMA, which I don't know what it's called now, but it's like a bursary fund where they would fund for college students to have a little bit of money. I think it was like £30 a week, and it just paid for things like your bus tickets, and some kids even got free bus tickets as well to get to and from college, and it would pay for like your books and things and your supplies to stay in education. But we didn't qualify for that because both my parents were working. So and like even my dad, like I've got, obviously there's two dads, so I've got my biological dad and then I've got my actual dad who brought me up, which is, it's called Ian, right? And he worked a lot as well. He worked for the Royal Mail, would work nights, sleep through the day. He had a hobby, he'd go Crown Green bowling, so we went there with him a lot. So I watched him work hard too. So both my parents that I lived with worked very hard. So that's like the work ethic in me came from there, because I was watching them earn the money, keep the roof over our head, take us on holidays and things like that. Now, things were not perfect, like honestly. the house we lived in wasn't great. But I'm not going to dive into that because I don't feel comfortable diving into that. But what I want to dive into is like the business side of it and what I've learned. So, got my work ethic from those two parents. But there is 3 lessons I learned from actually watching my dad, the drug dealer and window cleaner, do what he did as well. And I recognise sometimes we can take on our own parents' behaviours, and that will affect our life, it will affect our business. So I wanted to kind of take these 3 lessons that I've recognised and share them to help you listen to this with your business as well. So the first lesson is, don't spend it all at once. Because I've done this, I see people doing it, I saw my dad do it, I see my mum doing it still to this day. So when it comes to, this is a big money mindset lesson, definitely. So when it came to this happening within my parents, I used to see my mum get paid, she'd have a little wage packet, which was like a little brown envelope, it said how much she'd earned on it. I used to see her counting it out, counting on her fingers, writing down what she was spending on what, because I remember sitting there working out what a water bill would, making sure she could do everything, and then considering like the family allowance at the time, and she'd look at every penny that she got. And I do believe I got the organisation side from my mum when it comes to money management and finances, and even adapted into my business because I watched her do that. But what I did see as well is the money was coming in and it was being spent rapidly as well. So my mum never had any savings ever. In fact, she had it for us as kids. For me and I've got 2 sisters. So my youngest sister, this was before her time, but for me and my sister that's 2 years younger than me, Becky, we had some savings that my mum had put in an account for us, which was our money, but my biological dad stole that, and that money was never replaced. My mum feels guilty for that. That was not her fault. Yes, she may have let him ask to it. So, you know, you do the best with what you can do is what I'll say on that. But because of that, like, there was never any savings. So what happened was, I watched her like never have savings, and anytime she wanted something, I hope she wouldn't mind me talking about this, but she'd get loans, or I just see it squandered. So, for example, earn the money, spend it on a holiday, earn the money, go out to the pub at the weekend, and this was a repeating pattern. My biological dad did the same thing. So I used to watch him earn his money and squander it, like going back to when he was a drug dealer, when I didn't actually know he was a drug dealer back then, but I remember seeing this box of cash, and I remember him taking us out to Scarborough for the day. Well, this was a bit later actually now I think about it, but he once took us out to Scarborough for the day. It was great. We had a little bit of money that we could spend, which was spent in the shop. Me being creative, I spent it on pens and pads of paper. Always the creative stuff my money went on, or sweets. Took us for a nice dinner. We'd gone on the train. We went on this ride down the hill on like this tram thing. And we just had a lovely day at the seaside at Scarborough. But of course, after that, there was no money left. Blew it all on that day out. So then I had to work and work and work and work again to replenish that money, which is what we do. That's what working is. But again, at that point, there was nothing being saved. So I've witnessed both my parents, or all my parents, spend it all at once. And actually, I've done this as well. And I think my biological dad had ADHD. I'm actually starting to wonder if my mum has as well. But I don't want to just say, you know, recognise something in everybody and patent and label them. But I see it happen in business owners all the time. So back when I started my first business, everything was coming into my personal PayPal, into my personal bank account. And every time I got a sale, I was spending it. I wasn't tracking it and I was spending it. So then when I needed to pay for fabric, I was having to also use my personal account because I had no capital there to go and spend on the supplies that I needed to make the stuff that I needed to create for customers and clients and to deliver what I wanted to deliver. So that was one of the first lessons, like, don't spend it and put money in a separate account. I learned that very quickly and I started putting money in a separate account, but still I was spending every penny that came in. And this has been a very challenging cycle to break. To be fair, I don't feel like I've broken it. I'm still working on it. When I hold the money, I have to give it a purpose because it feels safer to give it a purpose than hold the money. I have been able to save. I a few years ago I'd built up a lot of savings, because basically what we did was, when we got married, been married for nearly 10 years actually, so it'll be 10 years, not next year, year after, so been married 8 years, and when we did that and we paid for the wedding, I got used to saving and putting money away and being quite organised with it, so I thought if I can do that, I can continue saving and we can have holidays and things. So I did that, I started continued saving, got so used to it, and then eventually I built up £3,000 in savings. But when we moved house, we ended up using those savings to buy a beautiful bed, spent £1,000 just on the bed and the mattress. We bought little things like curtain poles, curtains, bought my daughter's bed, things that we needed for the house, furniture, because we had a bigger house to fill, and we just wanted some nice new luxury things, and it was really nice to do that, and we spent the money on that, all of it. Every penny was gone. And then I've aimed to start working on building savings again, but we have just been spending it. Do have a small pot of savings now, but again we're still spending it because we've been paying for driving lessons. But it's always been the case, like money comes in, it has a purpose, it's been spent, it's been squandered. So that's the first lesson, is to not spend it all at once. I see so many people doing this all the time. Money comes in, that feels really good, but it feels unsafe to handle, so we squander it, we spend it all at once. When actually, when it comes to your business, it's really smart to segment that money into places that needs to be, still giving it a purpose, but not spending it all at once. So the first thing is putting money aside for tax, definitely. Retaining some of that money to build capital within the business, and then obviously paying yourself, and then you can spend it. So that's what I'd recommend looking at. I talk about this in my book and how I navigated spending and what I'd recommend, and a process called Profit First, which was really well explained to me by Claire Sweet. There is a book about it, but I didn't read the book, I just learned from Claire Sweet on a masterclass. So I highly recommend looking into that. But yeah, that's the first lesson that I wanted to talk about, because I see this one most commonly. Sorry, I'm fiddling with my earphone because my glasses are pressing into my ear and it's hurting. So that's the first one. The second lesson is to do things by the book. Now this one's probably a bit obvious, because obviously my dad was a drug dealer, so he wasn't doing things by the book. He wasn't doing something that was legal, for starters. But then in his window cleaning business, I don't think he did either. So I guarantee I would put £1,000 bet on that business not being registered with the tax man when he did his window cleaning business, because I never heard mentioned about tax. I saw him spend the money all the time, so we'd get pocket money at the weekend, he'd go to the pub, and it was all gone again, and then the week after that I used to see him talk about, and he used to get my cousin Dani to work for him as well, and like they'd go off to work, they'd clean as many people's windows as possible, and then on the Thursday they'd go collect all that money in, he'd pay Dani, he'd take his cut or pay anyone else that was working for him, and then I literally watched as he spent it. So I never saw anything put away which should have been for tax. I definitely never saw any letters from HM Revenue, and I mean, as a child you don't notice and pick up on these things, but he was just that kind of person to not do things by the book. And I think growing up watching this and learning from right from wrong, and my mum being so honest as well, I have a huge sense of justice. And when I started running my business and learning about the legal stuff, the first legal thing I learned was when I was doing my keepsakes. Before that I was making toys, and I learned about CE testing and CE marking them for safety. And so I got down a rabbit hole of finding out what else you needed to know for running a business. And it was things like distance selling regulations, terms and conditions. And I kind of got stuck into all that and learned it all. And you'll be surprised at how many people don't actually know this stuff. And they're running businesses and have been running businesses for years. And even worse, it will be business coaches that are teaching you how to do business that have not learnt this stuff. So Like, when I say I know business, I mean it. I know business, because I literally dug deep and I learned that stuff. I injected it into my business before I was even teaching business. So I learned about the distance selling regulations, and then I started getting quite angry when people weren't doing things by the book. And by this I mean they weren't registering the business, they weren't declaring it, they weren't tracking their accounts, they weren't reading up on the distance selling regulations, they weren't putting terms and conditions in place. And it just made me feel uncomfortable. Another thing was, like, when people would ask and request payments, people still do this now, through PayPal Pays and family, friends and family. But when you're asking for that payment, yes, there's a fee on goods and services, but you need to get your prices covering that fee. You need to know what that fee is, get comfortable with paying that fee, because that protects you as a seller and the other person on the other end as a buyer. And I really got really passionate about this, and it used to anger me so much when people weren't doing things by the book, because I did see a lot that people would get ripped off because there were no contracts, no terms and conditions in place, they weren't following the distance selling regulations, they were using PayPal Goods and Family, and now, like, it rings so many alarm bells. So I became a huge advocate of doing things by the book, and I believe it was part of that. It was part of seeing business not done legit, and seeing someone run a business that was actually illegal as well. So this was, like, infused in me, like, do things by the book. Also, I watched my parents do things by the book. Like, I mean, not 100%, but I'm not going to grass them up on a podcast right now. But, like, I saw them, like, work the backsides off, pay the tax, do things by the book. They did. So that was kind of ingrained in me as well, watching them do that, watching them work, pay the bills and things like that, do things by the book, like, do things legally. So I've watched that, and, like, that's how I run as well. It's all about my values and doing things in integrity and doing things the right way. It's really, really important to me. So that's the second lesson. So I want you to think about, in your business, where could you potentially not be doing things by the book, and where do you need to research and learn more. So if you've not got contracts in place as a service-based business owner, that's probably the first place you're going to need to look. If you haven't registered your business as self-employed, now, little disclaimer on this, the rules have changed since I first started business all them years ago, which was over 10 years ago. Now you have to earn £1,000 from your business before you declare it, or you can, that's in the year. However, if you're also employed, it's going to be a little bit trickier, and I am a huge advocate of just declaring it anyway, because there is benefits of that. Like, I know everybody's like, oh, I don't want them penalising me, taking money off me if you're on, like, universal credit, or thinking that it's going to be a horrible situation. Not the case. Like, you can actually get benefits for declaring your income from self-employment. So definitely think about that. Like, what areas could you improve in terms of running things by the book? Maybe you need to learn more. Maybe insurance is something that you need to look in. Just really think about that. And then the last lesson is to protect your assets that you need to run the business. So think about what is essential for you to have in order to run your business. Now, for me, it's probably my mouth, my hands, my laptop, the gear that I've got in front of me. Without any of that, I couldn't do what I do. So I need to protect these assets. And there's a little story here as well. When I was a teenager, my dad had a car, and obviously he used that car to do his window clean rounds. He would drive around that part of Leeds, go clean people's windows, have the ladders and the bucket, the water and everything, all these things on the car and in the boot, go drive round. He'd use that to travel to his customers. But then he actually wasn't insured. Don't even think he had a licence. And after, like, they can't take your car away from that. They can suspend you from driving. They can't take your car away from that. And I remember one day going there and there was no car. I think the car had actually been taken at this point, because he continued to drive without insurance, without a licence, and obviously, you know, whatever punishment came. And I'm thinking back, he didn't protect his asset, because the asset for running his business at the time was the car. So this kind of ties in with doing things by the book, because If he had just invested the time and the money into getting a licence, to buying insurance, then he could legally drive, do things by the book, and be able to then use that, or continue to use that, to be able to do the business, where he actually had to stop. I remember he handed it over to my cousin Dani, and my cousin Dani took over the rounds. Dani didn't even have a car, so that became very, very difficult for him to do. But he didn't protect his asset. His one asset was the car, to be able to get around, to be able to go do the job, to be able to earn the money. I haven't got a blooming clue what I used to do for money when things like this happened, because I don't believe that he claimed benefits. Who knows, but like, thinking of that, like, how could you live, I don't know how you could live life on the edge so much to risk having your income taken away like that. So I want you to think about what your business assets are that you need to keep running your business. Where could they be at risk, and how can you protect them? So for me in the past, I think it's definitely my laptop. Like, my laptop, previous laptop I had, was worth £900. Most money I've ever put into a laptop ever. Absolutely loved it. But I cancelled the insurance on it. Worst thing I could have ever done, because I am so clumsy. I dropped my laptop a few times. The USB port for the charger stopped working. I did try getting it fixed, but that's a whole other story. The guy just wouldn't fix it. And then I kind of managed with it, tried a new charger, things like that. Managed to get by and work from it, but then I dropped it a couple of times and I actually smashed the screen, and it got worse and worse and worse over time. It was dead. One day I could no longer work, so I had to then go get another laptop, and I've got the one that I've got now. This was worth £300. I'm gutted, because first of all, I originally wanted to replace that laptop that I had, because I loved it. It was no longer on sale anymore, and it was a lot of money, and I just didn't trust myself being so clumsy. And so I got this laptop that's £300, and I insured it to protect my asset, because without having this, I can't do the work that I want to and need to do. So I needed to protect my asset. So those are my 3 self-employment lessons from a drug dealer. You've had the backstory, you've heard the work ethic that I grew up around, and I just want to recap those 3 lessons that I came up with. So the first one, don't spend it all at once. So when money's coming into your business, don't spend it all at once. I want you to think strategically about what you are doing with this money. Second one, do things by the book. What do you need to research? What do you need to learn in order to run your business ethically, legally, and by the book? And then finally, protect your assets. So what do you need to run the business, and how can you protect your assets? That's it for this week's episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's been really interesting for you to learn something that you potentially, as a listener, or even people that have been in my space for a while, didn't know about me. Because not many people know that my biological dad has died. He died when he was 46, and he was a drug dealer. He was abusive, not to me, like I say, just to say, because he wasn't, but he was to women in his life. And it's quite surprising, because not a lot of people know this part of my life, so I just thought it'd be quite juicy and quite interesting to share, and the self-employment lessons that I've learned. And it was actually inspired by listening to a podcast from a friend who talked about what she'd learned, or what she'd witnessed from people in business in her family, because she didn't want to go into self-employment because of what she'd witnessed. Whereas I get that it can be very, very scary. So I wanted to dive into, for me, what I've learned. And there's probably so much more that I've taken on and could learn from that, because everything we grow up witnessing, experiencing, identifying becomes a lesson and becomes part of who we are. Definitely does. Conditions us into who we are. So yes, let me know. Please send me a message on social media what you thought of this episode. If there was anything that came up for you, what you found interesting from it. Was there anything you learned about yourself, or anything you've thought about from your own childhood, and lessons that you've learned from your parents and their work dynamic and what that looked like? Because I'd love to know, I'd love to hear, I'd love to get the gossip. So do please get into my inbox and share. Don't be shy. I'd love to hear it all. I'll see you soon.